Chris D'Entremont is now the Liberal MP for the Nova Scotia riding of Acadie-Annapolis, and he joins me now this Sunday for his first broadcast interview since Tuesday's floor crossing. Good morning, Chris D'Entremont.
Good morning to you.
You have sat as a Conservative politician, federally and provincially, for about 2 decades now. You were a provincial cabinet minister. After all that time, how do you explain to folks in your riding that actually you've changed your colors? You're a Liberal now.
Well, I mean, it's situational. We get elected to represent the best issues of our ridings as people come forward, and sometimes we have to make decisions that are hard and tough. And I felt that in this particular case, it was better to be a part of the government caucus than it was to be sitting in the opposition. And I'm hoping, as time goes on, that the constituents in Acadie-Annapolis will understand that decision.
You had that private meeting that we have reported on with the Prime Minister. Was that what sealed the decision for you, or had you already made up your mind going into that conversation?
No, I mean, this has been a thought for a long time, basically from the election, hearing from longtime supporters that wouldn't support me anymore because of the leadership style of the Conservative Party. So, I've been thinking about it a lot. And, I think people saw that I wasn't being utilized within my party, and they were reaching out. And when I had that meeting with the Prime Minister, because I really hadn't had the opportunity to meet Mr. Carney before, that did help a lot in making it clearer of what I wanted to do. But I tell you, what really made it, what sealed the deal is when I got yelled at when this became part of the news on Tuesday.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack there. I certainly want to hear about the yelling in a second, but I want to be clear. You said you weren't being utilized, or people were telling you weren't being utilized with the Conservatives. Did the Liberals suggest that there's more opportunity on their side of the floor, that you could be a contender for a cabinet spot, for example?
No, absolutely not. I think it was just looking at the mechanisms that they have. They would talk about, the caucus that we have here in Nova Scotia, the way caucus worked, what kind of input caucus was able to have in developing the budget. Those are all things that really don't happen over in the Conservative caucus. And quite honestly, this is a time in Canada where we should be really looking at building and trying to find ways to, counteract tariffs and everything else that's going on in the world. It's a time to work together. And, over the summer, I didn't see an opportunity, or I didn't see a move to work together. All I saw was more division and more anger, and I wasn't going to be a part of that anymore.
How many people did you believe were considering crossing the floor with you when you had that conversation with the Prime Minister?
I really think there was probably 3 or 4. We've heard upper numbers. I only know one for sure that was maybe considering it. So, it's always a maybe, but I think I see a lot of people within the Conservative caucus. Many of them are friends of mine. I hope someday they'll forgive me. But, people aren't happy with the leadership style, not just of the leader, but of the leadership team that's there. Quite honestly, a lot of times I felt it was a part of a frat house rather than a serious political party.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it was about who was friends with who. What kind of fun could you have with something? How could you end up beating up on someone else? What kind of negativity could you who could be the most negative? Who could be the most cutting? That kind of stuff. It wasn't about opposing something. It wasn't about keeping government to account. It wasn't about trying to do the best for your constituents. It was about tearing down. And again, as a progressive Conservative in Nova Scotia, a long-term progressive Conservative, I'm looking at building bridges. I wasn't looking at tearing them down.
Was Matt Genereux one of the people you believe might cross the floor?
Well, I mean, we know Matt did resign or resigns in the future, but I'll let him tell his story.
You said that what really clinched the decision for you was getting yelled at. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm sure when the political issue came out, everybody had that on their phone by budget time. I had the leader, the House leader, and the whip barge into my office, push my assistant aside, rush in, push, take the door and just push it wide open. to sit there and tell me how much of a snake I really was, and turning my back on my constituents and the people that voted for me, and really underline the situation that I made this decision. This was not. It wasn't about, hey man, maybe you're not doing well. Maybe we've misunderstood what your objectives were. There was none of that. It was just, how dare you do that? How dare you? And it really pushed me to a point where it's like, okay, well, I guess my decision is made for sure now.
I interviewed Andrew Scheer this Friday on the House, and he suggested that you left because you're mad that the Conservatives didn't make you Deputy Speaker. He also told me you told him you didn't like his YouTube videos. I suggested maybe that was about tone. He said you should have just unsubscribed. Did you suggest to Mr. Scheer that this was about the Deputy Speakership or his YouTube videos?
Well, I mean, way back when, was I upset of not getting the speaker job, or the work that I did to support my caucus and taking my name out of it? Yeah, of course, that made me a little upset. But I'm an adult, and I moved on. But what happened too over the summer is that when Andrew was the acting leader of the party, the tone never changed. The tone that we should have learned something from losing a third election. We should have learned something. And it seemed, and it continues to seem, that they haven't learned anything. So I'm 56. It's time that I do something a little bit different. It's time that I find other opportunities to support my constituents, because this, to me, is about the constituents in Acadianapolis. It's about Canadians. It's about trying to find solutions. And I can't do it sitting in that frat house.
Did you mean for the story to come out this way through Politico on Budget Day?
No, it wasn't. I think in passing, it was a comment. I probably should have phrased it a little bit better. And quite honestly, I didn't expect it to be stuck up on Facebook or Twitter that quickly. I guess I should learn after 23 years of being a politician that I shouldn't trust me 100% with that kind of juicy detail. But ultimately, it was in my heart. And sometimes you just have to lead with that. And I'm happy with the decision that I made. It's caused a whole bunch of other problems, but mostly the messages that I've been getting from folks has been very positive. So it's just going to take some time for people to understand that decision.
Have you talked to Mr. Genereux since he went public with his resignation?
I did text him just to make sure he was okay. And, we're going to get together at some point to talk it over. But I'm gonna let him again, figure out what he's going to be doing and how he's going to be doing it, and how he's going to tell his story later on. But I do wish him well.
You have been pretty pointed about Mr. Poilievre's leadership style. Did you ever try to address that with him, your concerns?
Yeah, no. Over the summer, I had a couple of opportunities to speak to the leader as he was doing his tour, I guess we can call it, on his research on what went right, what went wrong. I was also the chair of Atlantic Caucus, and we had him in Halifax back in August. Had the opportunity to talk to him there. But as time goes on, it just really didn't seem anything was changing. And even if in some of those conversations it did seem that he felt that he was going to be changing, or he understood that he might have to change his leadership style, I saw none of that in the fall session.
You campaigned against the Liberals just 6 months ago, and now you might actually be key to handing them a majority government. How are you personally squaring those two things?
It's hard in a way. I know what my positioning was during that election. People will say, well, I voted for you or the Conservatives or the platform or many different things. But I know that I did not really run on the Conservative platform. The platform that we had, did not address some of the things that we needed here. Fishing, of course, is always an important issue here. We tried to stay away from, pictures of the leader and all those things, because every single door, or many of those doors that we went to, it was, Chris, I can't vote for you this time because I don't like Pierre Poilievre. So we had to try to adapt our campaign style to be able to try to put that to a side and try to ignore some of those facts. But there's a number of things that I can attach to within the platform that the Liberals put out. Many times with my opponent, Ronnie LeBlanc, we agreed on the majority of the things. He was agreeing with my stuff. I was agreeing with his stuff. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be able to enact things that are right for our ridings. And I still think this is the best avenue for that. Is
it your intention to run as a Liberal in the next election, Chris d'Entremont?
I'm not sure at this point, because quite honestly, I've been around for a long time. It was a 17-year career as a provincial politician. We're on the third election now federally, which was probably one more than I had expected to do. But again, we're in minority situation. We have parties that continue to struggle on getting that majority going. So, I like I said, I'm 56. I need to spend some time at home, maybe. So, we'll talk that over with the family when the time comes, and just see what the political fortunes are. Time. A week is a long time in politics in Canada.
Listen, thank you for making the time for us this morning. I appreciate it, Chris d'Entremont.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We have received a response from Pierre Poilievre's office to what d'Entremont said in that interview with us about pushing and yelling by Andrew Scheer and Chris Warkentin. That response reads in full: Chris d'Entremont, who established himself a liar after willfully deceiving his voters, friends, and colleagues because he was upset he didn't get his coveted deputy speaker role, is now spinning more lies after crossing the floor. He will fit in perfectly in the Liberal caucus. That statement from the opposition leader's office. Well, the focus of this budget week has been on the now former Conservative MP, but that party would prefer to be talking about that $78 billion deficit and the massive spending in the Carney budget.
Never before have Canadians had to spend so much to get so little. This budget, with its record deficit outside of COVID, is a deficit twice as the size of the one Trudeau left behind, and $16 billion bigger than the Prime Minister promised.
We'll get reaction from Conservative MP Adam Chambers next to both the budget and the floor crossing news. Later, we'll bring you our interview with Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, and our Sunday Scrum will be here to discuss how Budget Week turned into a nightmare for the Conservatives with 2 departures from caucus. We're back in just 2 minutes. Conservatives have made it clear they are not the partners the Liberals need to pass their budget.
Our approach had been to demand an affordable budget so people could afford their lives. We didn't get that.
And so that's why we are planning to vote against it.
But the Conservatives have more than just the budget on their minds. In a surprise move earlier this week, Conservative MP Chris d'Entremont crossed the floor to join the Liberal Party, bringing the Liberals just 2 seats away from a majority government. Then another bombshell. Alberta MP Matt Jeneroux announced he will be resigning from Parliament altogether. Adam Chambers is an Ontario Conservative MP and the party's international trade critic. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Cullen.
We will get to the budget in a minute, but I do need to ask you about some of those comments we just heard from Chris d'Entremont, talking about a leadership team where it was more a frat house, he said, than a serious political party, focused on who could be the most negative, tearing things down. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, look, whenever there's a breakdown in the relationship, I think everybody should be reflective about how we got here. With respect to Chris, I mean, look, I'm disappointed that this is the first time that I personally am hearing these concerns from Chris himself. We have a very open policy in terms of people are bringing forward their concerns or their suggestions about how we can improve as a party at the caucus mic. Unfortunately, I have not heard these concerns yet from Chris before. So I feel sorry that we're in this situation, but I also think, we're only hearing part of the story from Chris. I'm not on the leadership team. I'm not involved, or I was not involved with the circumstances leading to the moment that Chris is talking about. What kinds of, positions or offers were being made to Chris in advance of that to keep him happy and feeling valued as part of the party. And my understanding is that there were a significant number of conversations leading up to the moment that Chris is talking about in terms of making him feel like a valued member of the party. Look, I would consider myself a moderate, middle-of-the-road conservative. I think that's my perception amongst my caucus colleagues. I have felt nothing but welcoming and being valued in the Conservative Party, even including from the leader himself, Mr. Poilievre, asking for my advice on a number of occasions, including helping out with the platform. I think we have a very big tent party. That includes considering a wide, varying degree of perceptions and suggestions. We have a saying, Mr. Poilievre often says, you have your say, but you don't always get your way. But we do have a very open policy and able to discuss concerns that people have, and people bring forward concerns about what they're hearing in their communities about how we can be doing better as a party and providing a better foot forward and solutions for this country, which desperately needs change. We just went through an election where Mr. d'Entremont and a number of other Conservative candidates across this country campaigned and were elected to bring change to Ottawa. So, as I say, I think I'm, disappointed that this is the first time I'm hearing that from Chris.
Let me ask you. Sorry, Mr. Chambers. I do want something else that he said there, though. So there's the negativity, and I take your point that you wish he had raised that more openly earlier. But what he describes after he made the decision, pushing a staff member is what you heard him tell us, raised voices, being called a snake. What's your reaction to what he described there?
Well, look, I was not in the room. Chris was. I think we'll have to allow those other individuals with whom he's making those allegations against an opportunity to discuss those. But I mean, I think in the heat of a moment, you can understand how tensions would be very high when the government is on the precipice of getting a majority, by the way, which it was not afforded at the ballot box. Canadians voted for a minority parliament. They voted for this prime minister's power to be checked by a minority. And the fact that the prime minister, instead of compromising some suggestions on the budget, has decided to try to manufacture a majority by luring or seducing over MPs from different parties. I mean, I think that is, what we're getting at in terms of feeling like a little bit of betrayal. And, the beautiful thing about democracy is that Mr. d'Entremont will, of course, have to answer for his actions in respect of the next election. And the voters will ultimately hold him accountable for the decision. And I think that's the way that the system ought to work.
But it's not just him. Of course, Matt Genereux resigned within that 48-hour period. Mr. d'Entremont said he believed there are 3 or 4 Conservatives who were willing to cross the floor with him. What is going wrong inside the Conservative Party right now?
Well, look, I appreciate that Mr. d'Entremont has now an interest in creating a little bit more chaos on our side of the House. I would appreciate that if there are others, that Mr. d'Entremont would allow those others to speak for themselves and not put words in anybody's mouths. In terms of Mr. Genereux, I think Mr. Genereux was quite clear in his own public statements. It is actually quite a loss for Parliament as a whole to be losing Mr. Genereux sometime in the spring. He has a great track record and a legacy to be proud of in terms of advancing private members legislation and doing a lot of things to advance the cause of men's mental health. I have not had the opportunity to speak to Matt. I consider him a close friend, but I hope to speak with him when we all return to Ottawa, and of course wish him well, but also, understand the reasons for his departure, which I think are his to explain. Mr. Chambers,
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in because I really do want to get to the budget here, and I know you do too. Great. But I just want to ask you quickly. Mr. d'Entremont said he hopes his former colleagues will forgive him one day. Do you see yourself forgiving Chris d'Entremont?
Look, I don't think anyone, goes through life doing well, holding long-time grudges. To be honest, I hope Chris finds what he's looking for. I believe that we're all sent here to do something. I hope that Chris does not have buyer's remorse. I fear that he might someday, given that we all campaigned on change and looking at the last 10 years and thinking we needed a change in government. So perhaps I'll just leave it there.
On the budget itself, there are a lot of Conservative priorities in there, even if the approach is different. Your party wants new energy projects, improved productivity. The Liberals are even cutting foreign aid, which is something that your party called for as well. Why is there not enough common ground in this to stave off an election?
Well, let's just look at the headline numbers. I mean, I first ran in 2021 because I thought Prime Minister Trudeau was spending too much money. We are now spending more on interest payments on the debt, not just than we do on healthcare, but the GST receipts that the government receives doesn't even cover the amount of money we're spending on interest on the debt. And if we get ourselves into economic uncertainty in forms of a recession, those numbers will increase dramatically. And so I am very concerned that the Prime Minister is putting the country in an unsafe or unstable fiscal position, especially given the uncertainty that we see in the world. And these aren't just my words or Conservative words. These are the words of even Fitch, the rating agency, who said that the government's fiscal position is being eroded and that it can't be confident that the projections will continue the way they are because they have a history of having higher deficits and higher spending than what they promise. So I think that's a primary concern for Conservatives, absolutely, is the level of debt that we're leaving for our next generation. And I think the Prime Minister could have made some additional compromises, certainly on that point. I mean, I recall the 2008-2009 timeframe when I worked in the finance department with Minister Flaherty. It was Prime Minister Harper and Minister Flaherty's responsibility, according to the media then, to make sure that the budget passed, to make sure that there were compromises made. And I'm not sure I've seen that here with this budget. I think instead we've seen the Prime Minister and his members try to lure other floor crossers in order to pass a budget so that they don't have to make any compromises.
We are right out of time, but I would like to understand right now, do you think the government is going to fall over this budget?
Well, look, I understand that they're in some discussions with other parties, and I encourage them to do that, to make the compromises. As I say, we're in a minority parliament. If Elizabeth May, who said she's not currently voting for the budget, finds her way to vote for the budget, I think that is an exercise in compromise. I don't believe that. Look, I think there's a lot of drama around this place in Ottawa, but I think we should keep the focus on compromising, doing the right thing for Canadians. And I don't expect that we'll have an election, but certainly I won't be voting for the budget myself.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time today, Conservative MP Adam Chambers.
Thank you.
So, after that defection from Chris d'Entremont, Budget 2025 is one vote closer to passing.
We welcome Chris D'Entremont, the new member in our team. And I think, there's probably people on the other side which are doing a bit of soul searching, because when you look at the budget that's going to invest more in infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, health infrastructure that are needed across our country.
We'll talk to the finance minister. What was in his budget and how it might affect you. François-Philippe Champagne is here with me next. What was meant to be the focus for this week, the first budget for Mark Carney's government. We now have a better sense of his plan to jolt Canada's economy in the face of U.S. tariffs. The budget includes $141 billion in new spending over the next 5 years. Much of it is focused towards infrastructure, housing, and defense. The budget includes huge cuts to 40,000 government positions and finding $60 billion in cuts and other savings. Still, this budget will not be balanced. The deficit, that's how much the government spends versus how much money it's bringing in, more than $78 billion this year. The Carney government says it's a price worth paying that they say will supercharge Canada's economic growth. François-Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Finance. Thank you for joining me.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Catherine.
You and the Prime Minister promised a budget that would be transformational, generational, but I'm sure you know there's a lot of criticism that it didn't meet the mark. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce says the budget is more transitional than transformational. The Business Council of Canada says it's not transformational. Economist Mike Moffat says on housing, disappointing is too weak of a word. Does it worry you when so many voices are saying they're not sure that this does the job?
I think Canadians understand there's a bit of headwind. We felt it in people feel it on the factory floor, in the fields. People have seen it in so many ways in their life, what we're saying. But if you look at Canada, we have the fiscal capacity to be able to invest in ourselves. And then we have to be judicious in where we invest. So infrastructure, housing, productivity and competitiveness, and obviously our sovereignty and our defense. And therefore, at the same time, you need to put the house in order. That's what people tell me. They said, we agree you need to be ambitious in your investment, but also rigorous in expenses. So I would say, if you compare Canada to all the other G7 countries, you would see that Canada stands out with respect to transforming and making generational investment. In that context, you would see that Canada stands out.
Minister, I want to ask you about those headwinds you mentioned. You are trying to use tax write-offs and other measures to basically psych businesses up about spending money and making investments. There is still a lot of economic uncertainty because of Donald Trump. Isn't that going to make it a lot harder to do what you're trying to do right now to convince businesses to invest?
Well, I would say, what's the alternative? I think we need to invest in ourselves, build one Canadian economy, finish the work of Confederation, make sure that if you produce goods in one province, they can be sold across the nation. We need to become our own best customers. And overall, we need to invest in ourselves. Yes, there's headwind. It's not unique to Canada. Our largest trading partner decided to change the rules of the game, and we feel it. Other countries are feeling it. But I would say in that sense, that's why we want to have an investment budget.
Okay, I want to ask you about affordability. Pardon me, Minister.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about affordability because you mentioned it there. A lot of measures aimed at business. Regular folks who are struggling to pay their bills, though. There's not new help in this budget, or certainly not a lot of it. Why not offer more pocketbook help to people?
Well, the first thing we did was a tax cut for 22 million Canadians. That's the flagship initiative on affordability. But
right,
we
but
didn't wait for the budget. Well,
yeah.
but we didn't wait for the budget, but it's in the budget because that was something that Canadians needed now. So we could have waited for the time of the budget, but we did it in advance. We did, in fact, as the first measure. Then we said what we need, what people are concerned about is affordable housing. We're doubling down to make sure that we can build more affordable homes for Canadians, which is really for many families. That's the big thing because how much you put in your budget for your housing is very key for Canadian families. So that's why we wanted to act there. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that by building a strong economy, there would be more opportunities and possibilities for Canadians. So affordability, you're right, that's the key point. And that measure of reducing taxes is leaving more money in the pockets of Canadians.
Pardon me, Minister, but let's talk a bit more about that because there is a substantial deficit in this budget, $78 billion more. The Conservatives point out Canada is now spending more money on debt servicing than federally on health care. They say it's not sustainable. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say 75% of it was first for affordability and secondly for sovereignty. I think Canadians would understand that faced with the changing world, I mean, the scope, speed and scale of what's happening in the world, you probably have to go back to 1945 or the fall of the Berlin Wall to see so much change at the same time. And so the first thing we did what Canadians would do was supported each other. So when there were tariffs imposed on industry, our auto workers, our steel workers, our canola farmers, we said we will stick together. We will help these industries to pivot. We will help the workers. We'll help the families. The other part of it is measures around affordability, which you mentioned as the first one, which is the tax cut that we offered to 22 million Canadians. So if you look at that number, you just have to remember, because that's important for people watching and listening to us, is that 75% of it is for sovereignty and affordability. And I think the moment requires that in terms of investment in people, because yes, you want to pivot, but at the same time, you need to take care of people now. And that's why you see in that number, a good part of it is really to do two things that I would say Canadians would say. Obviously, you need to respond to the tariffs, and obviously at the same time, if you can support Canadian on affordability, that's what people need now.
On Friday, the Prime Minister said, quote, "Don't worry, we're on the pipeline stuff. It's gonna happen." Does that mean that your government is about to go ahead with this pipeline without BC's buy-in, Minister?
Well, what I can say is that, we have the ambition to be an energy superpower. Canada is already an energy superpower in conventional and renewable energy, and the world needs more of Canada's energy. So I think this has been, and it's not just new, this has been key to the Canadian economy, and we can do that responsibly, sustainably. Sorry?
But a new, but I understand that, Minister, but he's saying a new pipeline is going to happen, and we don't have buy-in from BC. So I'm trying to figure out how you're going to square that.
But I would say, let's see. For the time being, we have the major project office. We said that we would do things in this country differently. We'll work with our Indigenous partner. We'll work with obviously provinces. At the same time, I think also Canadians understand that the natural resources sector is a big engine of Canadian economy. This is a blueprint for success. This is a confident country invest in themselves, and I think this is why I say it's generational, transformational, because you have to compare that with what our peers are doing. And if you look at Canada, we not only have the wherewithal to do it, but I think if you look at what we're doing, we're very strategic in how we invest Canadians' money to make sure that they have a return and we can build that strong economy, resilient economy, to succeed in this new world.
Finally, Minister, as we're recording this, the Conservatives have lost 2 MPs this week. I wonder whether you would be comfortable with the Liberals getting a majority government through floor crossings, wielding power that you didn't win in an election.
Well, listen, I've been a bit busy this week, as you might have seen. So
I'm sure you noticed,
I've really focused on the budget and delivering for Canadians because, one thing they told me, we want to move from reliance to resilience and the uncertainty you set into opportunity. So my focus has been there. Obviously, we welcome Chris D'Entremont, the new member in our team. And I think, there's probably people on the other side which are doing a bit of soul searching because when you look at the budget that's going to invest more in infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, health infrastructure that are needed across our country, strengthen our armed forces to defend our sovereignty, making our small, medium-sized businesses more competitive, do more affordable housing. I think for them, there's a bit of soul searching because I can tell you the mood of the nation. I was on the road for the last 2 days in the airports, in the street. People said, Canada is meeting the moment. We're going to invest in ourselves. We're going to be strong. And it's going to be okay. So I think I would not be surprised that you have people on the other side of the aisle which are doing a bit of soul searching. How could they explain to their constituents?
Not just soul searching? Is that what you're implying?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I can only imagine if you're on the other side and you see these things. It's pretty difficult to go back to your constituent and say, at a moment like that, you would not be supporting Canada to go forward and really, support the government agenda and the budget, which is really driven to grow Canada stronger. I mean, that's what I assume is going on for a number of people on the other side of the aisle.
Did you deliberately court some of them with this budget, though, particularly announcing specific projects that would be in opposition ridings?
Well, listen, I only focus on what Canadians want. To be honest, I don't have much time to go around and I listen to people. Obviously, we're a minority government. We need to work with others. But this is really a budget that puts Canadians first.
I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much, François-Philippe Champagne.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Chris D'Entremont's defection has, let's face it, really ticked off some of his former Conservative colleagues. D'Entremont is suggesting he might not be the last one to cross the floor. That and what to make of D'Entremont's suggestion his former political party is acting too much like a frat party. Our Sunday Scrum is with us next.
This has been a thought for a long time, basically from the election, hearing from longtime supporters that wouldn't support me anymore because of the leadership style of the Conservative Party.
The newest member of the Liberal caucus, Chris d'Entremont, from our exclusive interview earlier this morning, he says he believes other members may be ready to cross the floor as well. But what does it mean for the minority government, and how could it play into Pierre Poilievre's upcoming leadership review? Let's bring in our Sunday scrum. Rob Russo is Canada correspondent for The Economist and former CBC Parliamentary Bureau Chief. Donna McCharles is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. And Aaron Wary is a senior writer for CBC News. Aaron, I promised you we were going to start with you this time. I'm a woman of my word. Obviously, Chris d'Entremont had some pretty critical things to say about his now former party here, comparing them to a frat party, describing the conditions under which he left, which a Conservative Party spokesperson has denied. I mean, he is a Liberal now, so how much weight do you think there is put on the kinds of criticisms that he's offering of the Conservatives?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think people are going to judge his comments differently, and obviously he's on the other side, as you say now, so there's some incentive for him to speak critically of the Conservatives. That said, I think he's probably speaking to a conversation that has been ongoing really for months now, which is about how Pierre Poilievre does politics. And I think it's worth remembering that, this sort of most recent concern about, unity in the Conservative caucus started with his comments about the RCMP and suggesting they were despicable and had covered up crimes, to protect Justin Trudeau. And, that I think is what kind of got us to the moment we're at right now. I think, the question of his leadership and how he does politics is something for him to answer, Pierre Poilievre, that is. But I think, to a certain extent, he sort of is what he is at this point. And I guess that sort of leaves the question with Conservative MPs of whether they are on board with this or not. And, if you take Mr. d'Entremont at his word, he decided at some point that he wasn't on board with that anymore.
Tonda, Matt Genereux is an interesting step in all of this because CBC News has reported, and I know the Star's done a lot of excellent reporting around all of the floor crossing and whatnot this week as well, you personally, that Mr. Genereux met with the Prime Minister, and then there's this decision that the announcement he's going to resign, and then it turns out that resignation is not until the spring. Do we think that Conservatives have basically stopped the bleeding at this point, or do we think that Chris d'Entremont might be right about the possibility that 3 or 4 folks might be on the cusp of leaving?
It's not really clear. I mean, I think these conversations are still in play. And I think that Mr. Poilievre's position is a lot more rockier than perhaps most of us had thought. And will still play out in the next few weeks ahead of his leadership review in January. Look, I think that people who support Pierre Poilievre within the caucus, and that seems to be at this point the majority, would hope that the leadership review would produce a big number for Mr. Poilievre in support of him, and then that would kind of damp down the caucus challenges. But here's the thing, to Aaron's point about this all being galvanized by the RCMP leadership comments by Mr. Poilievre that drew sharp criticism. I think even before that, and after he was re-elected in Alberta to a seat in the Commons, when he returned, all the talk about the lessons learned post the election regarding tone and whatnot seemed to not have been finding ground in the way the party and the party's leader was communicating. So I think caucus members, party members are still looking at a lot of this. They're looking at whether Mr. Poilievre is an effective challenger and leader of a government in waiting to Mr. Carney. And I'm willing to guess that there are a number of caucus members that are still a little bit uneasy, But the bigger question, if you're going to sort of take the big leap that Mr. d'Entremont took and not the leap that Mr. Genereux took in just stepping down, is the question of, are you willing to run again as a Mark Carney Liberal / small p progressive, small c conservative, and whether or not your prospects look better then. Look, it's a huge decision to make. Now, does Mr. Poilievre survive? I think he's still in survival territory. But I think he's got a much bigger challenge than we thought in managing and addressing his caucus concerns. And actually, look, I mean, ahead of that leadership review, I'm told that there's a pretty heavy hand on the delegate selection meetings, just as there was a heavy hand on candidate nomination meetings back in the day of leading up to the election. So he's got trouble.
Rob, what do you think about how Pierre Poilievre should handle this moment? Because, of course, if you think people might be leaving, you can either sort of wrap your arms around them in a hug, or you can wrap your arms around them insisting that they stay in place.
Well, I think he needs a change of strategy, I think, at a minimum. I think your interview with Mr. d'Entremont was illuminating on several fronts. Number one, it's not just the Liberals lurking outside the Conservative caucus room with lusty whistles saying, come and join us, you're going to like it over here. There's more going on than that. Number one, the water is warmer for progressive Conservatives under this Liberal leader. They look at somebody who's spending big on defense, somebody who's cutting taxes, somebody who's focused on the economy. That makes the water warmer for some people who might want to come across. I think in terms of the tone that Mr. Poilievre continues and the posture that he continues to adopt, I think that there is real unease throughout some quarters of the Conservative caucus that continues to be felt. I look at Mr. Genereux. Yes, he didn't cross the floor. He'd rather be unemployed than stay in the Conservative caucus. That tells you something. I think it also tells you, in terms of the comments of Mr. d'Entremont, that there is still a sense of meanness, if not a lack of seriousness, that is disturbing to some people in the Conservative caucus. And we saw that. They like to blame boomers for the result in terms of returning the Liberals and Mr. Carney. But I think that lack of seriousness hurt them in parts of Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes in particular, even though it appealed to young men in particular. That coarseness appeals to a lot of people in the age of social media. It hurt them, though, in those parts of the country, particularly with women. And if they don't win women over or win more votes from women, they're going to have a great deal of trouble forming the government. And if more cross over, then the ask that Mr. Poilievre is making is, in effect, don't just make me leader in a minority situation for a year or two and keep me on a tight leash. I am going to be your leader for the rest of this decade. And that's a more serious ask.
Aaron, I want to ask you about the Liberals. We just have a minute left here, but the case that Conservatives are making is that it's there's something that's not quite scrupulous about getting a majority government through floor crossing. It is, of course, allowed under the system, but the public doesn't always love the idea of floor crossers. Is there something politically risky for the Liberals in this?
I think there probably is a risk to some extent, depending on exactly how they act and how, if there are further floor crossings happen, how they are carried out. I understand the argument that Canadians didn't vote for a minority parliament, but I would point out that minority parliament, the phrase, did not appear on anyone's ballot. You elect MPs, and those MPs have to make decisions. Look, if the Liberals start offering cabinet posts or making sort of nakedly almost bribery to get people to cross the floor, I'm sure people would take that poorly. But if MPs decide that they don't feel comfortable with the Conservative caucus, or if they feel that the Liberals are headed in the right direction and they can explain those decisions, I don't know that there's necessarily going to be as big a backlash.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Appreciate all of your insights. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Rob Russo, Tonda McCharles, and Aaron Weary.
Thanks.
So, a budget, a floor crossing, and a resignation. It has been another big week in federal Canadian politics. If you did not catch all of our exclusive interview with Chris D'Entremont, Nova Scotia MP, who moved from the Conservatives to the Liberals, it will be up on cbcnews.ca later today. You'll also be able to find it on the CBC News YouTube page if you want to see that, as well as the Conservative response to both the budget and the floor crossing from Adam Chambers. I'm Catherine Cullen, sitting in for Rosemary Barton. She will be back next week. Thanks for your time.
Canada, the U.S., two countries, totally different politics, but we share a border, a media space, and a lot of the same problems. I'm Michael J., and this is Borderline Politics, where we cut through the cliches and compare real policy, culture, and power on both sides of the 49th parallel. From free speech to healthcare, housing to populism. If it matters politically, we're breaking it down. Subscribe for smart, cross-border political insight. Two countries, one conversation.